Hi, I'm Elizabeth, this is the Bookish North, and today I'm here with my version of one of my favourite videos on BookTube, and that is the top 10 books I have read in the previous year. So these are books I have read in 2019, they were not necessarily published this year. I went through my Goodreads to make a sorting of candidates for a top 10 list, and when I've done that, it were exactly 10 titles on the list, so no further reading was necessary. But yeah, these are my favourite reads of the year gone by, and it's got a decent mix of things, I'll say. So let's just get straight to it. So number 10 on my list is A Little Hatred by Jo Abercrombie. I could probably have told you at the beginning of the year that this was going to end up on my list, simply because I am a huge Jo Abercrombie fangirl, or more specifically a First Law Universe fangirl, because I did not quite enjoy his YA series that's outside of this universe as much as the other books. So I have reread all the 7 prior books in this series before this was published in September, but you don't really need to have read the others. You could start on this. This is the start of an independent trilogy. But if you have read the others, you will just have more backstory and know more about the people in the book than if you start on this one. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. I think Jo Abercrombie is an author that has continuously developed throughout his career, and I feel like with every book in this series, I feel like it's the best one yet. And that was the same with this one. I feel it was more nuanced and definitely more female empowering than the previous books. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the next installment in this trilogy, which will probably be my most anticipated release of 2020, or maybe number 2, because Hilary Mantel has a book coming out in March that I'm sure I'm not the only one on BookTube waiting for. At number 9 we have Bloodchild by Octavia A. Butler. She's an author I've been meaning to read for a long time. I've heard so many good things about her, especially here on BookTube. This was a bit of a random pick for my first book by her. This is a short story collection, but I was very impressed with this. I felt like all of the stories had sort of the perfect length, and they all drew me into the universe and the story. I've not necessarily read a lot of short stories when it comes to sci-fi and fantasy before, but this really worked well for me. I think there was one story in here that I didn't quite like as much, but the others to me were very strong and had independent universes, and they worked well as short stories. So I'm very eager to explore more of her longer works, because she sort of says it herself in the foreword here that she is not a short story writer, and that these are all exceptions. These are stories that she's come up with that actually fit into a shorter format, and for that I agree, and then I'm eager to explore more of her longer works. I have Kindred on my shelf, so that's probably going to be my next read by her. So number 8 on this list is a book that felt like it was written for me, and it's called Free Woman, Life, Liberation and Doris Lessing by Lara Fiegel. Apart from matching my outfit today, it also talks about one of my favorite, my favorite writer, and she explores how Doris Lessing deals with freedom in her works. So she talks a lot about her life and biographical information, but she also reads and has some close readings of some of her novels or short stories or non-fiction, and she just looks at how she portrays freedom in relation to certain topics. And for me this was super interesting, and it definitely deserves a place on my top 10 list of the year. But I will say you probably need to have at least a small interest in Doris Lessing to enjoy this, even half as much as I did. But for me, definitely one of the best reads of the year. At number 7, that's how far I've gotten now, isn't it? Yeah, at number 7 we have a Norwegian book. It's called A Voluntary Death by Stefan Kverneland. So this is a graphic memoir where he talks about his father, his relationship to his father, and how he dealt with the fact that his father committed suicide when Stefan Kverneland was 18 years old. It felt like this was such a perfect blend of text and images. It was also a very respectful way of dealing with suicide. He portrays the grief, the incomprehension of the choice, but he still respects his father's choice, and he's not bitter or accusatory, but just more exploring all of the feelings and all of the things going on. And I thought this was a brilliant exploration of that, and a great book. It hasn't yet been translated into English, but it might still be. It was published in Norway in 2018, and it usually takes a little while for translations to appear. So at number 6 we have another Norwegian book, which again felt like it was exactly the book that I wanted. It's called Never, Never, Never by Lindströmsborg, and it deals with a girl in her early 30s that is adamant that her life will be full even if she does not become a mother. And we see her in relationship with her boyfriend and her friends who are having a baby, and I just really liked how this book treated the topic of voluntary childlessness. So for me this is definitely a highlight of this year. So coming in at number 5 for me this year is Doris Lessing herself with Landlocked. So I read 2 novels by her this year, A Ripple from the Storm and Landlocked, which are books 3 and 4 about Martha Quest. It's a coming-of-age story set in colonial Africa that sort of closely mimics Lessing's own coming-of-age story, though it's not exactly the same, obviously. This is a novel series. So this is a quintet, and I plan on reading the 5th and final book last year. But so far this, I would say, is my second favourite Lessing novel, only beaten by The Golden Notebook. It's clear that this book was written after The Golden Notebook, whereas the other prior 3 books in this series were written before. This is a much more complex book, and it has more in common with The Golden Notebook than the previous ones, which is probably why I really love this as well. So number 4 on my list this year will be The Cost of Living by Deborah Levy. This is a memoir. It's about identity, and it's about writing, and it's about being a woman in the world of today. She portrays how she deals with life after the divorce from her husband, how she has to find a place of her own, like an apartment for her and her children, how she finds somewhere to write because she can't do it in the apartment, it's too small, there's not enough space for her. But she also talks about like general experiences of being a woman and trying to find out who she is now that the label of wife is no longer part of her identity. And I absolutely adored this. And that leads me to the top 3 list of my reading year, and I have no idea which order to put these in. So I'm just gonna do like eeny, meeny, miny, mo. And if I've chosen at another day, it would probably be different. But yeah, let's say coming in at number 3, we have Before Mars by Emma Newman. So I read the entire Planetfall series this year, at least all the 4 books that are out so far. I have absolutely adored all 4 of these books, so I mean they could have been on the list, all of them, but I'm sort of telling myself that an author can only be once on my best of the year list, and if I have to choose a favourite of these books, I'm gonna stick with Before Mars. But you know, all of them were great. So this is a sci-fi series. They are all independent stories, but they're set in the same universe, and they do sort of interlink as well. There are some common people going through them. They can be read in any order, though I would say you should read after Atlas before you read Atlas Alone and before Mars, and that's the only real thing about chronology, I would say, because if you don't read that first, you will be spoiled for the ending of that by reading either this or Atlas Alone. But yeah, I really love these books. They combine thought-provoking ideas of a future society. They incorporate mental illness in a natural way, and they just have that human touch, and where the relationship between people are at the core of the book. And then they're also just frolicking, pacey, exciting books to read. So these are the books that I've been pushing on just about everybody here in Norway this year. Even people who don't normally read sci-fi have actually read and loved these. So I'm considering that my influencer duties done for the year. And then I'm left with 2 books, and which one of them to hold up as number 2 is completely arbitrary because I love them equally, but let's go with Insomniac City by Bill Hayes. This is another memoir. It's about Bill Hayes, who was living in California with his partner, when his partner suddenly during the night gets a heart attack and dies. And Bill Hayes is left grief-stricken, and he eventually decides to pick up and move to New York to get away from all of the memories that are attached to the apartment that he used to share with his partner. And so we are part of this journey where he goes to New York and he falls in love with the city through walking through it, particularly at night, because he struggles with insomnia, hence the title. And that part of the book is great. I really love those books that about people walking around New York. For some reason, that's a big, box for me, so that box is ticked. And then it's also just a beautiful love story about him meeting the scientist Oliver Sacks, and they're starting a relationship, and just the details, the small things we get to know from their everyday life, that was just so heartwarming, and I really loved being privy to taking part of some of the most private moments of their personal lives and their story together. It was just so, I was a sucker for the love story of it, basically. And then it is heartbreaking because this does not feel like a big spoiler, it even says so on the blurb, but Oliver Sacks also dies from cancer, and it is heartbreaking. And this was a very emotional journey for me, and definitely one of the most impactful reads of the year for me. And then that leaves my favorite book of the year to be Giovannis Room by James Baldwin. Everybody on BookTube, it feels like, have been recommending me this book for ages. I have bought it a long time ago, and then I've been afraid to read it, because when it's something that everybody tells me is so great and that I will love it, I get apprehensive. I'm afraid it will disappoint me. I'm sure it's no way it can live up to the hype, and I was wrong. This book was everything everybody says it was. It's gorgeously written, it's so emotional. It's the story about a young American man living in Paris, where he meets another man and they have a relationship, and it does not end well. And that is not a spoiler, because that's the beginning of the book, where you hear that how something tragic is happening, and then you go back in time to see what leads up to that. And it was just so heart-wrenching, and I knew where it was going to end, and I kept hoping against hope throughout the book that something would happen that made the end not true somehow. but I don't know. It was beautifully written, so powerful, and yeah, definitely worth the top place on my top 10 books of the year. And yeah, definitely reading more James Baldwin. I'm gonna believe you now. I will. So that was my best of the year reading list. I am super happy this time of year to be watching a lot of similar lists at a lot of other channels. But if you want to share some of your favorites with me down in the comments, please do. And until next time, bye bye.